When most people think about the forest, they think about survival. They think about chopping down trees, building shelters, fighting cannibals, and trying not to starve in the dark. And on the surface, that's exactly what the game presents itself as a survival horror sandbox where you are stranded on a mysterious island and forced to endure. But the longer you play the forest, the clearer it becomes that survival is just the disguise. Underneath the crafting systems and enemy encounters, this is a story about grief, desperation, and the consequences of refusing to accept death. It's a story about parents who are given the power to break the natural order and what happens when they decide that they're entitled to use it. At the center of that story is Matthew Cross, a character most players instinctively label as the villain. He is the one who brings your plane down. He is the red painted man who kidnaps your son and the face of everything that goes wrong. But Matthew Cross is not the monster of the forest. He is a warning. And by the end of the game, the most disturbing realization is not what Matthew does, it's the fact that players eventually make the same exact choices. Before the plane crash, before Eric LeBlanc and his son Timmy ever enter the story, the island already knows how this is going to end. The forest tells its tale almost entirely through environmental storytelling. There are no long cutscenes explaining the past, no voiceovers guiding you through the lore. Instead, the game expects the players to piece together the truth by paying attention to the world around them. From the caves you explore, the drawings you find, the bodies you pass, the tapes you watch, and the structures that don't quite belong. One of the first major revelations players have is that the island was inhabited long before modern civilization ever arrived. Deep beneath the surface, hidden inside sprawling cave systems, are massive obsidian structures that are clearly artificial. These are not natural rock formations or random ruins. They were deliberately constructed spaces with a purpose. Players encounter doors deep underground that only open when enough weight is placed on pressure plates by using skulls or rocks in the area around them. Beyond these doors are ritual chambers and mummified corpses scattered in unnatural ways. Some appear to have died suddenly, while others are posed deliberately, kneeling or facing cave walls as if frozen in prayer. Those same cave walls are covered in drawings, and many of those drawings depict the same thing a tall geometric structure that does not resemble any natural object. This structure is an ancient artifact that becomes one of the most important elements in the entire game. This artifact has the power to bring the dead back to life. Well, sort of. The number of bodies found underground tells us something else that's crucial. Either these ancient inhabitants attempted resurrection repeatedly, sacrificing again and again in the hope of bringing loved ones back, or an attempt was made that went catastrophically wrong and wipes everyone out at once. Either way, their story does not end in triumph. It ends in mass death sealed beneath the earth. Centuries later, new groups arrive on the island without understanding what they have found. We know this because players find evidence left behind by Christian missionaries, crude drawings of crosses, praying figures, and grotesque multi limbed creatures. The same creatures that match enemies players encounter in the game, specifically Virginia. That detail alone tells us that the mutations already existed long before modern science ever arrived on the island. They weren't created in a lab, they were already here. Their remains are found in the caves alongside their drawings, suggesting they attempted to document or confront what they found and they failed. Whatever faith or protection they thought would save them, it wasn't enough. As time passes, the island becomes a magnet for outsiders. Explorers, adventurers, thrill seekers, and even film crews all make their way there. Players can discover abandoned campsites, climbing equipment, scuba gear, and even scripts that suggest a survival style reality show is being filmed. This isn't just one single expedition that has gone wrong, it's a pattern. Wave after wave of people arrive, drawn in by curiosity, fame, or mystery, and none of them leave with answers. One of the most disturbing discoveries is a yacht anchored offshore. Inside the yacht, players will find maps, notes, and evidence that strongly suggest the people aboard were searching for missing children. Another item that players find is a milk carton with a missing child's photo on it, something that has no business being on a luxury vessel on vacation. There is also a magazine dated 1984 inside the yacht, telling us that the yacht came here in the 1980s. This means that people were disappearing on the island for decades before the events of the game ever took place. This is where the island starts being exploited, and Sahara Therapeutics enters the story. Deep underground, players discover a massive modern research facility, complete with corporate branding, medical equipment, keycard access, and extensive documentation. This is the home of the Jarius Project, a corporate initiative focused on internal life and advanced resurrection science. Publicly, the project is framed as experimental treatment for terminally ill children. Parents volunteer their kids because they're desperate and hopeless, and because they trust Sahara's authority and promises. When those children die, though, Sahara's research does not end. Instead, they turn to the artifact. Players find observation rooms filled with mutated children. Medical documentation describes seizures, neurological instability, and extreme genetic deformations. Rather than ending the experiments, though, Sahara keeps these children alive in containment to observe the effects. The most damning detail is that Sahara clearly knows the process is flawed. Resurrection with the artifact does not restore life, it distorts it. But instead of stopping, they continue experimenting, trying to refine the process and make it viable. At the center of this project is Matthew Cross. Matthew Cross is a senior researcher on the Jarius project, and while the project bears his influence, his motivation is deeply personal. His daughter Megan Cross is terminally ill, and Matthew becomes increasingly invested in the possibility that the artifact beneath the island can save her. To him, the Jarius project is not only research, it is hope. Megan's mother, Jessica Cross, does not support what Matthew is doing. Emails found in the facility show their relationship deteriorating as Jessica cuts off contact and resists Matthew's attempt to involve Megan in the project. At some point, Matthew's desperation turns into pressure. He threatens Jessica, warning her not to divorce him, and shortly after, a legal protection order dated June 12th is issued, preventing Matthew from contacting either Jessica or Megan. This appears to be Matthew's breaking point. Players can also discover an autopsy report dated September 20th, confirming that Jessica Cross was violently stabbed to death and discovered by her sister. The game never explicitly states that Matthew killed her, but it's the nature of the crime that tells us this. It's violent, personal, and uncontrolled, strongly suggesting a crime driven by emotion rather than calculation. In fact, it was the final barrier keeping Matthew from his daughter. After Jessica's death, Megan is brought to the Sahara facility. Videotapes found later show Megan arriving at the mountain lab by helicopter, visibly ill and confined to a wheelchair. Another tape shows her alive in the cafeteria, surrounded by scientists. These recordings suggest that Matthew has fully taken control of Megan's care, bringing her into the Jerry's project despite her late mother's opposition. At this stage, Matthew is no longer acting as a detached scientist. He is acting as a father who believes he has already lost everything except the possibility of saving his child, no matter the cost. The final videotape marks the collapse of that belief. In this video, a child mutates into an armsy and breaks out of containment. The facility descends into chaos, alarms blaring, hallways fill with blood, and control is completely lost. During this breach, Megan's wheelchair is knocked over. Again, the game never shows Megan's death directly, but after this moment, there is no further evidence of her being alive. And from this point forward, Matthew's behavior changes completely. Notes written after the attack and the collapse reveal a man no longer grounded in reality. He insists that Megan is not dead, only sleeping, and that belief becomes his anchor. Matthew's emails also shift in tone. He begins theorizing obsessively about the artifact's capabilities, including the possibility that its energy beam can interfere with aircraft systems and pull planes from the sky. A termination letter confirms that Matthew is fired for unethical and inappropriate use of company equipment and resources, indicating that he is now acting entirely out of Sahara's control. The facility is left in ruins. Bodies litter the halls, containment is broken, and mutants roam freely. There is no evacuation, no cleanup, only abandonment. After losing Megan, his wife, his career, and the project that once justified everything, Matthew paints his body red, a practice that later proves effective at deterring cannibals, and he turns to the second artifact in the mountains and prepares to activate it. Matthew Cross does not bring down a plane in a moment of rage or madness. By the time he activates the artifact, he is calm, deliberate, and fully committed. What remains of him is driven by a single belief that death itself is a mistake that he can still correct, if only he is willing to pay the price. And Matthew is right. The artifact does exactly what he believed it could do. High above the island, a commercial jet suddenly loses control and falls out of the sky. The plane he brings down is not chosen by Matthew out of malice, it is simply the next one available. On board are Eric LeBlanc and his son Timmy. When the plane crashes, Eric briefly regains consciousness just long enough to see a half-clothed man painted red carrying his unconscious child away. Before Eric can react, he loses consciousness again, and by the time he wakes up, Timmy is gone. From Matthew's perspective, this is not him being cruel. It is a necessity. Timmy is taken because the artifact requires a living child, and Matthew believes that this is the only way to bring Megan back properly. In his mind, this is the final step, the final correction. Matthew brings Timmy deep into the underground facility to the resurrection device hidden at the heart of the island. He places Timmy inside the artifact and activates it. The process works exactly as it was designed to. Timmy dies and Megan lives. For Matthew, this should have been the moment everything was justified. Every sacrifice, every crime, every loss. But resurrection in the Force is never clean cut. Megan returns unstable, changed, and rapidly mutating. Whatever she came back as is not fully the little girl that he lost. In fact, Matthew does not survive this reunion with his daughter. Megan kills him, stabbing him with her crayons, ending the story of the man who is willing to sacrifice the world for his daughter and becoming the final consequence in his refusal to let her go. Eric, meanwhile, is still searching. By the time Eric reaches the heart of the facility, he has fought through cannibals, mutants, and the ruins of Sahara's ambition. When he finally finds the artifact in the facility, what he discovers is devastating. Timmy's body lies inside the device, and he is already dead. The sacrifice has already been made. Eric then encounters Megan. She attacks him, her mutation accelerating, and Eric is forced to kill her in self defense. In the aftermath, broken and desperate, Eric attempts to do what Matthew did. He places Megan's body into the artifact, hoping, pleading that it will give him his son back. But his sacrifice is rejected. Resurrection requires a living sacrifice. This is the moment where the Force stops being Matthew Cross's story and becomes the player's. Eric has now gained access to the same power that Matthew did. And for the first time, Eric is no longer just reacting to his story, he is in control of it. And Eric is left with a choice that no parent should ever have to make: accept that his son is gone forever, or Eric can activate the artifact, and another plane will be pulled from the sky, and somewhere else, another family will experience the same horror that Eric did. In the canon ending, another sacrifice is made, and Timmy is brought back to life. 1 year later, Eric and Timmy appear to have been rescued. Eric sits on a talk show telling the world how they survived the island, and for a brief moment, it almost feels like a happy ending. That is until Timmy begins to seize on live television. The audience panics, and Eric rushes to him, but then, just as suddenly as it started, Timmy stops and smiles. Years later, we see Timmy again, older now, investigating another site connected to the island. He has maps, blueprints, and a tattoo on his arm that reads "Fight Demons." As he works, his arm ripples unnaturally beneath the skin. The seizures return and the screen fades to black. Matthew Cross was never the villain of the forest. He was just a cog in the cycle, and not the first parent to prove how far someone is willing to go when given the power to undo death. The forest isn't asking players who the monster is. It is asking us how many times we are willing to become the monster, how many children we would be willing to sacrifice before we finally accept that some things are not meant to be fixed. This game ends by showing us that Timmy survived, but survival is not the same thing as being saved. Sons of the Force picks up years later in a world that is shaped by the choice to save Timmy. A second island is active, with more powerful artifacts, and whatever Timmy came back as is no longer being contained. Mutations have become more aggressive, and more advanced facilities have been created. And there are giant golden cubes with hidden dimensions causing more chaos to its willing billionaire victims. In many ways, Sons of the Force is less like a sequel of The Island and Artifacts, but the continuation of Timmy's story and struggles, with a glimpse of what happens when a child is brought back by these artifacts, grows up, and the consequences are left unchecked. With The Forest 3 now on the horizon, the question is not whether the cycle continues, it is who will be willing to pay the price next. This has been Screen Queen Sessions Lunar Abyss. If you guys enjoyed this video, please drop a like, and if you want to see more videos just like this, hit subscribe and keep that notification bell on so you don't miss a beat. I'll see you guys soon.